WWE put two of the most compelling human beings in the history of professional wrestling in the same ring on April 13th, and what happened between them was so charged, so layered, and so personally devastating that the entire wrestling world is still not fully processing what they actually witnessed. This was not a segment. Do not let WWE's production packaging and their carefully engineered presentation fool you into categorizing what happened on Raw on April 13, 2026 as a standard television confrontation between two performers executing a scripted interaction. What you watched was two men who have spent the better part of 2 decades existing in complicated, overlapping, mutually defining proximity to each other in this industry, in this company, in the specific cultural consciousness of professional wrestling fandom, finally standing across from each other with nowhere left to hide and nothing left to protect. CM Punk confronting Roman Reigns was not a wrestling angle. It was a reckoning. And the specific words spoken, the specific silences between those words, and the specific way both men's bodies communicated things their mouths were not saying told a story so dense with genuine history and genuine emotion that a single viewing is not sufficient to absorb its full weight. There are people who watched this segment live and are still unpacking it. And by the time this video is finished, you are going to understand exactly why and exactly what WWE has constructed here that could become the defining program of this entire generation. To understand what CM Punk confronting Roman Reigns actually means, not as a television segment but as a collision of two specific careers, two specific philosophies, and two specific personal mythologies, you have to go back to the foundation. Not just to their most recent interactions or their most recent storyline touchpoints, but to the bedrock of what each man represents in the architecture of modern professional wrestling, and why those representations are, at their core, fundamentally incompatible in a way that generates genuine friction rather than manufactured conflict. CM Punk is professional wrestling's most persistent and most loudly articulated conscience. His entire career identity has been constructed around the refusal to accept the gap between what this industry could be and what it frequently chooses to be instead. He has burned bridges, ended relationships, walked away from money that most human beings cannot conceptualize, and returned from absences that the conventional wisdom of the industry said were permanent, all in service of a personal standard that he applies to himself and to the people around him with equal and unsparing rigor. He is not always right. He is not always consistent. He is not always likable even to the people who admire him most. But he is always, without exception, exactly and precisely himself. That authenticity, even when it is uncomfortable, even when it is self-destructive, even when it costs him more than it costs anyone else in the room, is the source of the connection he has with an audience that has followed him across 20+ years of a career that should have ended multiple times and somehow keeps generating new chapters. Roman Reigns built something categorically different and in its own way equally extraordinary. Where Punk's career is a record of resistance against authority, against compromise, against the distance between genuine and performed, Roman's career after the bloodline turn is a record of total and unapologetic embrace of power. The tribal chief character was not merely a heel turn. It was an excavation of something real inside Joe Anoa'i, a genuine authority, a genuine gravitational pull, a genuine belief in his own indispensability that the babyface presentations of his earlier career had been actively suppressing. When Roman Reigns became the tribal chief, he stopped performing confidence and started inhabiting it. And the result was 5 years of the most compelling character work WWE has produced since the Austin McMahon era. He built an empire inside this company. He made people acknowledge him not through crowd instruction but through the sheer accumulated weight of what he created. And he did it on his own terms, in his own time, in his own way. Which means that when CM Punk, the man whose entire identity is built on refusing to acknowledge anything he has not personally verified as worthy of acknowledgement, walks out and plants himself directly in Roman Reigns' space, you are not watching a wrestling angle. You are watching an irresistible force meet an immovable object. And both of them know it. The crowd on April 13th was already operating at a heightened register before the segment began. There is a specific quality to a live wrestling audience that has been primed consciously or unconsciously for something significant, and the Raw crowd that night had that quality in abundance. Roman Reigns had been in the building. His presence alone changes the atmospheric pressure of a WWE event in a way that almost no other active performer can replicate. The anticipation had been building throughout the evening with the specific slow burn tension of an audience that knows something is coming but cannot confirm the precise shape of what it will be. When CM Punk's music hit, the response was immediate and overwhelming and deeply layered in its emotional content. This was not a clean pop. This was not a simple hero's welcome. This was the specific kind of reaction that only Punk generates, a sound that contains cheers and countercheers and the edge of something almost confrontational even from the people who are ostensibly celebrating his arrival, as though the audience itself cannot entirely agree on how to feel about this man and has decided to feel everything simultaneously instead. Punk walked to that ring with the measured, deliberate pace of someone who was prepared for this specific moment, not just in the days immediately preceding it but across the entire arc of a career that has been building toward exactly this kind of confrontation since the first time he picked up a microphone and decided that honesty was more important than convenience. He stood in that ring for a full extended beat before Roman Reigns' music hit. That beat, that silence between Punk's arrival and Reigns' entrance, was not dead air. It was loaded with everything that has ever existed between these two men, every interaction and every non-interaction, every moment of mutual awareness in an industry where two performers of this magnitude are inevitably aware of each other even when they are not in direct contact. The audience felt it. You could hear it in the quality of the crowd noise, not the enthusiastic roar of people being entertained but the breathless, almost reverent quiet of people who understand they are present for something that cannot be rewound. Roman's entrance on April 13th was calibrated with a precision that only he and the people who know him best could have engineered. He did not rush. He never rushes. Rushing would have been a concession to Punk's framing, an implicit acknowledgement that Punk's presence required an urgent response. Instead, Roman walked with the specific unhurried authority of a man who has decided that the timeline of this confrontation belongs to him regardless of who initiated it. The lay around his neck. The acknowledgement of the specific sections of the crowd who were giving him what he felt he was owed. Every gesture was a communication, and the communication was consistent and unambiguous. I am not here because you called me. I am here because I decided to come. When he stepped through those ropes and the two men finally occupied the same ring at the same time, the building produced a sound that was genuinely difficult to categorize. It was not celebration. It was not hostility. It was the sound of collective recognition of an audience that understands it is watching history being made in real time and is responding to that understanding with something that transcends the normal vocabulary of crowd reactions. What Punk said in the opening exchange established the terms of the confrontation with the surgical efficiency that has always been his greatest microphone weapon. He did not attack Roman with bluster or with rehearsed catchphrases or with the kind of broad theatrical antagonism that mid-level heels use to generate crowd response. He used specificity. He used the particular details, the real ones, the ones that carry genuine weight because they are grounded in documented reality rather than narrative convenience, to construct an argument that Roman could not dismiss or deflect without directly engaging its substance. He talked about legacy not as an abstract concept but as a precise accounting of what Roman built and what it cost and who paid those costs alongside him. He talked about the bloodline not as a storyline but as a genuine human drama involving real relationships and real consequences for real people. And he did it all with the specific calm of a man who is not performing anger but channeling something considerably more dangerous: absolute certainty. Roman's response was everything that makes him the specific kind of performer that exists in a category largely by himself at this stage of his career. He did not get defensive. Defensiveness would have been to tell the visible evidence that Punk's words had found a structural weakness in the foundation. Instead, Roman smiled. That specific Roman Reigns smile that is not warmth and not amusement but a kind of patient, almost paternal condescension, the expression of a man who has decided that the person in front of him does not yet understand the nature of the situation they have placed themselves in. He let Punk finish. He absorbed every word. And then he spoke with a quietness that was more threatening than volume would have been, delivering the single most important line of the entire segment, a line that reframed the entire confrontation not as Roman being challenged by Punk but as Punk having made a decision whose consequences he would be entirely responsible for managing. The physical confrontation that followed the closing escalation of the segment before the eventual separation was executed with a restraint that made it more powerful than an extended brawl would have been. Both men understand instinctively that the anticipation of violence is more dramatically valuable than its premature delivery. The nose-to-nose proximity, the absolute refusal of either man to create distance or break eye contact, the visible tension in both sets of shoulders that communicated bodies preparing for something that minds were still deciding whether to authorize. This was professional wrestling performing at the level of legitimate dramatic art. And the crowd's sustained, breathless reaction throughout confirmed that the audience felt the distinction between what they were watching and what they normally watch on a weekly television program. Let's remove the lens of casual fandom for a moment and look at this with the clear eyes of someone who understands what WWE needs at this specific point in its history. The post-Bloodline era has produced genuinely compelling television and genuinely talented performers ascending toward main event status. But it has lacked, and this is not a criticism so much as an honest assessment of an almost impossible standard to meet the specific gravitational weight of a program where both participants carry the kind of personal and professional mythology that makes every exchange feel consequential beyond the parameters of the storyline containing it. CM Punk vs. Roman Reigns is not a program that derives its weight from creative construction. It derives its weight from 20+ years of parallel existence in this industry, from everything both men are, everything both men have sacrificed, everything both men represent to the audience that has followed them across the full arc of their respective careers. You cannot manufacture that weight. You cannot write it into existence with clever scripting or production value. It is either there or it is not. And on April 13, 2026, standing in the same ring on Raw, CM Punk and Roman Reigns demonstrated beyond any reasonable argument that it is absolutely, undeniably, historically there. The segment on April 13 was not the story. It was the opening paragraph of the story. And the story it is opening has the potential, if WWE has the courage and the creative intelligence to follow it to its fullest and most honest conclusion, to be the defining program of the post-pandemic WWE era. Every question it raised is a question worth staying invested for. Every unresolved tension it established is a tension that has earned the audience's patience. And the two men at the center of it are, without qualification or caveat, two of the greatest professional wrestling has ever produced. This segment needs to be discussed everywhere right now. Drop your full reaction in the comments and tell us where this program ends. Share this video immediately because this is the conversation the entire wrestling world should be having today, and it starts right here.